Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you. All right, this presentation again is about the change of blood lineage and how this process given by the true parents is able to adopt us into God's lineage through the blessing. First, let me offer prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we came to understand how much you have been suffering throughout history since the fall of Adam and Eve. That all of your beautiful children that you intended to live in love and happiness and joy fell into evil and so much pain and suffering. And it's been thousands of years. When you sent your son Jesus, you had such hope that the kingdom of heaven could come on the earth. But people were faithless at that time in your revelation. We waited another 2,000 years until now. And again, we are at a time when history can take a totally different course and the kingdom of heaven can begin to come on this earth. We really pray for an understanding that comes from you, Father, as we share these words of our true Father about the change of blood lineage, and that it be an understanding that can sink deeply into our hearts and be shared with others, so that the true value and meaning of the blessing for all mankind can be available to us at this time. We want to pray and offer this, and I offer our prayer in the name of Jim and Robbie Stevens, and bless them for family. All right. Again, I put this PowerPoint on the internet so that you can download it and read the quotes. All the quotes from True Father come from this book, Blessed Family and the Ideal Kingdom, and all of them from, I forget exactly, section 4 or something like that. But it's, I can find out if you need to, but it's in there. It's all about the change of blood lineage. So as we know, in the beginning, Satan tempted Adam and Eve, and they fell and came under Satan's control. His ideas, his self-centered, selfish heart and energy and emotions were transferred to Adam and Eve, and their children as well were born into that kind of environment. If we think of what kind of environment would be ideal for children, that's not it. If we look at our world around us and we see what kind of environments children are being born into, it's almost obvious that if you put them in a bad home or a broken home, that their hearts are going to be damaged almost all their lives. It's going to be very, very challenging for them to overcome that situation. Well, that's what happened to the children of Adam and Eve, and their families and their children and their children, and on and on. I was reading the Bible this morning in Genesis, because last time I gave this presentation I only had Genesis 6:6, but when I read the Bible I read Genesis 6:5. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. I mean, when I read that, I thought, oh my God, we give this Bible verse, God's heart was filled with pain a lot, but we don't include the one before it, that all wickedness was filling the earth and men's hearts. So, generation after generation after generation after generation, more and more people being born into this world in a sinful situation, pain and suffering multiplied more and more. If we even put our toe in the ocean of God's suffering, we would almost die to experience that kind of suffering. When you see one person suffering, your heart is broken. God has watched all of his children suffer. So what a great day when finally the true parents could come on the earth. Those who could begin the process of bringing mankind back to God. So we have no understanding of how God feels towards the true parents, for the conditions that they made in their lives and allowed God to begin to work in a new way on the earth. And through their children, and the possibility now exists for people that are here to come back to God in a way that has never been known before in human history. That we can be adopted. We cannot adopt ourselves. The condition that Adam and Eve made is not reversible by us. It has to be reversible by parents who stand in the fulfilled position that Adam and Eve should have fulfilled. So once that is accomplished, now a whole new thing, a whole new providence from God can begin to take place. That the change of the world going over back to God's side has begun. We can't see it physically, but it's taking place spiritually all over the world now. And all the people that true parents touch can make a connection spiritually to God that wasn't available before, and allow God to work in ways that he couldn't in the past. And so especially the people who go through this process called the blessing, the change of the blood lineage, adopts us. True parents can adopt us. Officially, from God's point of view, they're adopting us. It's not anything we did, it's grace from God. So we become part of a new family. And we're a new authority exists. Like in the courts, when there's an adoption that takes place. A child is no longer connected with his old parents, but becomes adopted and into a new lineage. So we now have a new authority, we have a new protection, a new defense against evil and against Satan and his accusations. And we can receive a new inheritance. And what we can pass on to our children is different. It's a new, whatever we inherit, we can pass on. It's ours. It can't be taken away. As long as, of course, we make faithful conditions. And so the process that Father talks about in this book is what I want to talk about today. It's very, because my background is engineering, I really like to set it out like an outline and just follow these steps. And this is showing what's taking place externally and what's taking place internally to reverse what happened at the fall of Adam and Eve. So first, Adam and Eve were engaged by God from the time they were children, but they united, centered on Satan, not following God, but following Satan, and in a self-centered love relationship that they had. So how is that reversed? By matching an engagement ceremony in which we follow the course unselfish love, centered on God and true parents. They received the blood lineage of Satan. This is original sin. That's reversed through the holy wine ceremony, the change of blood lineage ceremony, and we are adopted into the true parents' lineage through that. And that is the removal of original sin. Eve then fell with Lucifer in spirit, but she fell with Adam physically. So remaining pure and faithful to God during the engagement time, and then the sister in the position of the bride of Christ and the mother of the brother then brings the brother back, so restores the brother who is more connected with the archangelic point of view. And the brother is restored from the archangel position by being faithful, and this is definitely not the kind of engagement that everybody else thinks of in the world. It's something, a whole different thing is taking place here spiritually. This restores Adam and Eve back to the position before the fall. A husband and wife, or two engaged people, are now back to the Adam and Eve position. And originally, this would have been a 3-year course of faithfulness. 3 years to change your heart and keep it faithful to God during that time. As a indemnification as a reversal of what happened at the fall. This is our rebirth back to where Adam and Eve were pure and sinless. The next thing, step 4, Adam and Eve were married, but they weren't married by God. They were married under Satan's power and authority, in Satan's realm of control. The way that is reversed is through the blessing ceremony, which is God's blessing, God's marriage ceremony. This is marriage under God and true parents' authority. And the inheritance of God's love and authority now is given to you as a husband and wife to create children within God's dominion and God's control. And then through the blessing ceremony, there's symbolism of restoring history, and there's symbolism of holy water as a baptism, a rebirth. Adam and Eve had self-centered sexual relationship. How do we reverse that? Actually, after the blessing, there's a period of 40 days of abstinence from sex, where you purify your attitude towards sex. So it's a way to create heavenly centered sexual relationship, lawfulness, and especially gratitude. Because we have not fulfilled completely the original ideal of perfection as Adam and Eve should have done. We haven't reached the level of relationship with God like Jesus did. Jesus was qualified to marry, but we aren't at that level yet. But this conditionally, by doing these kinds of things, God accepts us and allows us to go forward as if we had. This is incredible grace. There was historical resentment all throughout. Look at all those generations of people that I showed in the previous slide, that big triangle, all those people. How many people were abused? How many people were harmed by the relationships that God intended to be ideal? Tremendous misuse and abuse all throughout history. How do we heal that in a symbolic way? How do we artistically put ourselves in a position to be offerings, to represent mankind, and then go over that problem? This is the meaning behind the spiritual value of the indemnity stick ceremony, where we are dissolving ancestral resentment. And then, lastly, the physical fall and lineage continued under Satan. We have the 3-day ceremony and the holy handkerchief ceremony, where we, the bridegroom moves from the archangel to the son to bridegroom position. And I'm going to talk about how we're bathing in the blood. This is physical salvation. So, I'm going to now put up words from this book that explain each of these different steps. From the viewpoint of the principle of creation, God and the parents created the spouse. God created all children, all people. So, as the creator decides the purpose. Why were we created? Who are we supposed to marry? God had a plan, right? So, God created our spouse, and God had in mind the marriage of a man and a woman. So, following the law of recreation, it is essential that God, father and mother, not ourselves, select the spouse. So this was in the early days when it was very serious that we make spiritual conditions to separate from self-centered love relationships. So father decided, recommended to you. I mean, you had a final choice always, but father would say, I want you to marry this person. I believe that God wants you to marry this person. And in our covenant, following the heavenly law, to accept that our husband or wife will emerge from there. Unification Church standard of marriage. In the Unification Church, following the principle, God and then Father are supposed to select your spouse. This is from Blessing an Ideal Family. Before my matching ceremony to my wife, I did 2 conditions of 40 days for prayer and studying the divine principle to more deeply understand the matching and to clear out any kind of fears that I might have about the process and who I might get. So some of Father's guidance, which was the most scary, was be prepared to be matched to your worst enemy. The last person on earth that you'd choose to be matched to on your own. Be prepared for that. So I was trying to clean myself out of that and imagining who's the last person that I'd want to be matched to. And it was during the second 40 days of prayer, and I had read the divine principle in the section where it says that God created man and woman to be perfect complements and to be able to reflect God himself through our oneness. And suddenly I felt, wow, this is amazing. All my fear went away that Father was going to punish me with some woman that I would have a hard time getting along with. No matter who it was, according to God's principle, and Father can't violate the principle, we had to be able to make that oneness. We had to be able to reflect God, that we were going to be the image of God. So even if it was difficult, the possibility had to exist that we would become a perfect couple. So I was relieved after that. I had to wait like 5 or 6 months before the matching ceremony, but I was just anxious to stand up there and see who it was. Come on in. But I was confident that God would give me someone that I could really make an ideal marriage with, because that's the principle. Well, the idea of our spouse being chosen by God is a theory of the ideal of creation, and following this standard, centering on this ideal, your blessing will be under God's protection. So when we offer up our hearts and our love and our marriage and our children, our lineage, everything to God, then God offers his protection. There absolutely should not be anyone who arbitrarily chooses a spouse as he or she pleases. The Lord of the Second Advent is the only person who has inherited from God the authority to determine the spouse. Very powerful. I'm sure that this will go down in history as some of the famous scary words like Jesus, you know, if your eye causes you to sin, cut it out, kind of thing. Absolutely, do not stand in a place where you want to pass through the blessing in a position that centers on yourselves. You should know that the blessing is not for yourselves, it is for the nation and even the world. Moreover, you must take to heart that the blessing is for the sake of your descendants. Because Adam and Eve, in the position of having been engaged, fell by marrying in the wrong way, that false marriage has to be denied and rectified, centering on God. So, this restoration cannot be done in any arbitrary manner. It has to have the opposite content of the fall. Engagement ceremony is a ceremony that restores the fact that the human ancestors, Adam and Eve, fell during the engagement period. Engagement ceremony is the beginning of the day of promise to liberate man's resentment as well as God's resentment. I mean, you can imagine how much God looked forward to people offering their marriages to him and their children. What will happen in the future when there will be blessings for the whole world? The right to give the blessing will be passed to you. We will have the right to bless others. The father transfers what he owns to his son. Again, this goes back. We inherit now because we're adopted, so we inherit from true parents. When the father transfers what he owns to his son, it is comparable to the rightful heir supervising all the yield of the harvest. No matter how young or youthful the heir is, he is the one who will supervise and control. Likewise, when the inheritance is passed on, it does not matter who is better or worse. When father hands down this authority in the future, even if that heir is crippled, people must receive the blessing from that person. That time will come. You must realize this, and you must know that this place of blessing is the place where the most valuable relationship is decided, and a place which comes about only once in your lifetime. So the second thing was Adam and Eve received the blood lineage of Satan, and that's original sin. So the holy wine ceremony is actually where we change our blood lineage. That's our conversion and adoption into true parents' lineage. So Father says, what are these? Engagement, holy wine, and marriage ceremonies. These are not ceremonies following some kind of precedent. They are unavoidable ceremonies necessary to indemnify the fall by making all of the contents of the fall reappear symbolically. That's what we're talking about here. We must change the condition of having inherited the lineage that was tainted through the fall. If we do not do this, we cannot remove the original sin. The ceremony that removes the original sin which came about through the fall and changes our lineage from Satan's to God's is the holy wine ceremony. The holy wine ceremony is what roots out Satan's blood that has tainted the human lineage through the fall. In other words, it is the ceremony that removes original sin. To create what God desires, we must wake up to a new self, originating from a total denial of the old. That will not come about just by our believing. We must present the condition needed for that. That is the holy wine ceremony. So just believing cannot do everything. We have to actually make a condition, offering up our marriages and so forth to God, and taking the holy wine. The holy wine ceremony has a significance similar to the Eucharist. When Jesus looked at bread and wine and said, "This is my flesh and blood," and he had them drink it and eat the bread, representing his body and his blood, taking his body and blood into themselves for the forgiveness of sins. The holy wine ceremony is the ceremony that establishes the condition that the person has become one with true parents. So it's a external representation of becoming one with true parents. If a person becomes one body with true parents, Satan cannot accuse him or her. The person stands eternally in the position of having nothing to do with Satan. What does a holy wine ceremony do? It is a ceremony to install God's body inside my body. It is this ceremony which can cleanse the original sin by receiving parents' love, receiving the substance of God, and inheriting a new blood lineage. Without going through this ceremony, we cannot go to the place of the blessing. Thus, this ceremony is a ceremony which converts the lineage. In the holy wine, there is the flesh and blood of parents, true parents. Holy wine is the wine of love, the blood of the parents, and the wine of the husband and the milk of the mother. It represents the water of life, the blood of parents, the manifestation of all glory and the love of bridegroom and bride. It contains in it the life force of the Father. So, just as Jesus said, "This is my body, this is my blood," the holy wine is the blood of true parents. With the holy wine, I'm giving out the substance of the Father's heart and blood lineage Through it, I am giving out the life force and forming a connection of lineage. This was after we had the holy wine ceremony. I remember there was 3 cheers of Monse at the end, and I just felt that all of my ancestors were cheering, and I was like flying up into all the stars of space. It was a amazing experience. Like, we've been waiting thousands and thousands of years, you know, much bigger than just, you know, the 2 of us drinking some wine, right? It was an incredible celebration that was taking place, a change, you know. People, I guess my ancestors understood a whole lot more deeply than what I did. Father talked about it, you know, and what the meaning of it was before we drank it. But you know, it takes sometimes a spiritual experience before you feel it in your heart. You know, you're going through the motions externally, but you don't understand the significance a lot of times. The holy wine is given to the wife first, and there's a certain process, right? Because it's reversing what happened at the fall. At the fall, Satan first tempted Eve, and then Adam was lost. Therefore, we first established the restored woman in a position to find the man. The man receives the wine representing the parent's flesh and blood through the wife. By drinking this wine in this way, he comes to stand in a position of having passed through the internal body of mother, makes the indemnity condition for the separation of Satan. So again, the holy wine is done in a certain way. You know, the ceremony is not just drink it. It's first the woman drinks half, then the man drinks half. Well, Eve fell with Lucifer in spirit, and then Eve fell with Adam physically. So the sister, during the process to restore that is during the engagement time after the holy wine until the blessing, the sister has to remain pure and faithful to God during the engagement, and she becomes like the wife of Christ, the bride of Christ, as talked about in the Bible. And then in some ways, spiritually helps the man to come back in faith from the archangel position into a restored Adam position. So again, this is not a worldly engagement. You must establish a condition that you have entered the womb of a mother who is restored from the fall. So the woman takes the position of a restored Eve, a restored bride of Christ, and then remains faithful to the Messiah, the true parents, true Adam position. The mother who is in a position of not having fallen. Excuse me. How is this fulfilled? It is done centering on love. Since the fall happened centering on love, restoration also has to center on love. In order for us to be restored, we must go into the womb again. But that's not possible in actuality. Therefore, we are establishing the condition that we are restored by becoming one body, centering on love. In this way, by spiritually uniting with the restored Adam, we become one body with him, restored Adam being true Father. We become body with him, one body with him, receive the heavenly blood lineage. And then this describes the blessing ceremony where they were, Adam and Eve married under Satan's control. Now the blessing ceremony is all different, and there's symbolism in all the different parts of the blessing in reversing what happened at the fall. So walking towards the officiator, which would be the true parents of the ceremony, or whoever's leading the ceremony at that time, symbolizes walking the course of 6,000 years. To represent the formation, growth, and perfection stages of that course, we are making 21 people and 12 people. So there are attendants that you walk past, representing the true standard, men and women as bridesmaids. So after 7 steps, you bow 3 times as a condition going over the formation stage. So all this was part of the blessing ceremony. I don't know if they still do all this anymore. So this course is a history from Adam until now. So especially the course, 3 dispensations, Adam, Jesus, and the second advent. So this is the meaning of walking between the groomsmen and the bridesmaids. the way to meet the true parents. These men and women symbolize establishing the spiritual standard of 12 tribes and 24 elders. By bowing, you are establishing an indemnity condition. True parents sprinkle the holy wine. It says wine, but they use water at the time of the ceremony. This establishes the condition that the bride and groom have fulfilled the restoration by indemnity. Establishes a condition to go beyond the foundation of the ancestors in the spiritual world. The sprinkle of the holy wine, water, is establishing the condition that you have gone through the course of restoration by indemnity. Also, it is for establishing the condition to go beyond the foundations laid by the ancestors in the spirit world. That's kind of a repeat, actually. So then there's a 40-day abstinence period after the blessing ceremony in order to center your sexual life, your sexual relationship on God rather than on self-centered relationship. Because once you start the sexual relationship, it becomes very easy to think about only that because it's such a powerful experience. So you want to, just like we're taught to always offer the first fruits of everything to God. Then the offering for 40 days of your sexual life to God is through that purification period of abstinence. After you're married, you must go through a 40-day indemnity period, a period that you must pass through. In order for a couple to reach the position to love each other sexually, they must obey certain regulations. In order to be victorious on this difficult road of indemnity, absolutely refrain from any man-woman relationship and from talking or thinking about it until you complete the indemnity period. So again, trying to offer it purely to God. 40 days is a period to pay all historical indemnity. So there's a, you're getting so close to the sexual relationship, then all kinds of thoughts may be coming in from your ancestors and so forth. Temptations will come in at that time because all of history is being kind of gone through in your lifetime. The sermon today, he brought up that I am in a historical position to restore all of history. This is another place where we see it happening in our life, taking place right in what we're doing. The 40 days until the 3-day ceremony corresponds to the period to indemnify 4,000 years. Marriage life starts from the day the indemnity period is completed. Well, but we have all this historical resentment from misuse. All of our ancestors, women were abused so much by men, and some men were abused by women, but there's so much carried in people's hearts in the spiritual world. So this indemnity stick ceremony is a ceremony to try and recreate a situation and go over that situation. We think of Jesus dying on the cross. How much suffering did he go through in his life, but he could never receive the blessing. And yet we get it. How much physical suffering have we gone through in our own lives? And think of our ancestors. For many, many generations, maybe, they're suffering. And yet what did we do? How did we get this great blessing? So maybe they would have some resentment against us. Maybe they would have some anger. Maybe they don't like your spouse, if it's an interracial marriage. My wife's father did not like our marriage. So maybe some of his ancestors didn't like it either. They're in a position to bother us in our relationship. So this indemnity stick symbolizes a lot. And it's a ceremony of offering our physical bodies to be struck in order to change the heart of the people, of our ancestors who have negative feelings. All men and women in human history have misused the hip bone. And thus man has resentment against woman and woman against man. Without dissolving this resentment, you cannot stand as an original couple that is free from this resentment. Since this resentment came about through woman, the man hits the woman first, the 3 strikes represent 3 stages and 3 ages. So it's a painful ceremony, very painful. I can't say that I experienced anything spiritual, like only pain. But it wasn't until many years later that I even understood some of the spiritual significance of it. It was one of those things, well, you got to do this, okay. We did it. I believe I was really fortunate that I was put in a position to have to teach people who were about to do the 3-day ceremony, I mean the indemnity stick ceremony. I had to teach them why to do it. Why should you hit really hard? I prayed really hard, and then I got that answer. I understood that this, it's not just us, this is for our children. We don't want our children attacked by evil spirits, least of all, right? So, can be a very powerful ceremony. And then the physical fall and lineage under Satan, we have the 3-day ceremony and particularly the holy handkerchief ceremony, or the holy handkerchief part of the ceremony. Man acquires the authority of restoration centering on love only in the perfection stage, not the formation or growth stages. That's because the age of Adam and the next period were periods of failure. As a result, in the Old Testament age, people did not inherit God's formation stage right of love. All throughout history, we've never been given God's right, God's permission to have sex. Centering on Christianity, people did not inherit God's growth stage love. Only after inheriting that formation, growth stage love privilege can we stand in the completed Testament age realm. The 3-day indemnity ceremony establishes that condition. It is a process of symbolically restoring the Adam and Eve fall that brings us to the completion stage where we ideally would be when God blesses us in marriage. That we are not perfected like Jesus, so we don't really have a right to have sexual relationships from God. God is giving us permission even though we haven't qualified fully. Again, tremendous grace from God. We haven't fulfilled the original design of nature, of God's original plan. The first day represents the restoration of fallen Adam in the Old Testament age. The second day is restoring through indemnity the situation of Jesus in the New Testament. Third day is recreating the bride and the bridegroom in the place of Jesus. From there, for the first time, you can start on the proper track. So it's after the 3-day ceremony is completed, now you're free. Now you can start on the proper way that God originally designed. Establishing the indemnity condition in this substantial way is complicated. And there's a lot that goes into the 3-day ceremony. You've got to have pillows and candles and picture, and you've got to do different bows, and you've got to be in different positions, and you've got to say different prayers, you've got to bathe. So, many things that are part of the 3-day ceremony. The holy wine ceremony establishes the condition of being born from a new mother. In the holy wine, there is the blood of indemnity. By drinking the holy wine, you are being purified internally. By wiping your body with the holy cloth, you are being purified externally. I remember Father said, as we were, when he was giving guidance, said, with this holy handkerchief, with the holy wine on it, the blood of true parents, you wipe your body. After you take a shower, you wipe your body with the handkerchief. That's the blood of the true parents there. You are disconnecting your physical body from sins you've created in the past. From any sexual relationship you've had with another person, there are invisible threads, Father talked about. With the holy wine, you cut those threads. You're no longer connected to the fallen relationships you've had in the past. So, once we are through all of that, and now we're in the realm of the blessing, and we're free to have sex and have children that are not connected through original sin to Satan's lineage, now is a chance for God to really see the coming of his children on the earth. And for God to really work more in ways that he's ever been able to before. So this has brought tremendous hope for God. Because now, even after Jesus was crucified, you got to think, oh my God, how did God feel? But then as Christianity began to develop and grow, how did God feel? 2,000 years God was waiting. What was his hope? That true parents could come on the earth. And then when they were victorious, and now blessed children are coming on the earth, everywhere. We're not seeing tremendous changes in the world externally, but internally things are taking place. Lots of hope for God now. It's a chance for true happiness for God and for all humankind, getting back to the original ideal. God finally gets to have his own children and his own grandchildren. We're at a stage where we're waiting for grandchildren. We're thinking about grandchildren. We're even getting theology about grandchildren that we never thought about before, because we weren't in a position where grandchildren would come. But now when we're beginning to understand, and we talk to people who have grandchildren, everybody says, it's heavenly, it's great. It's a whole different realm of experience of love. I haven't met one person who said having grandchildren they didn't like it. It was like, it's wonderful. So this is the whole thing. God never had grandchildren, right? So this whole thing is now developing in the world. God is becoming a parent and a grandparent. That's what he wanted. That was his ideal. He wanted all of us children multiplying and multiplying and more wonderful, wonderful children. Right? That was God's idea. The whole world is love. It's not messed up. It's not sinful. It's not painful. It's just a world of wonderful heart, and everyone is experiencing love from everybody they interact with. Every family is filled with love. Such a wonderful ideal. It just, you go, why don't people get it? Why is everybody so selfish? But we have to change the blood lineage of mankind. That's the beginning process. All right?
Thank you.
That's why. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. I always learn something else when I share too, so it's special, very special. Again, thank you very much, and have a wonderful weekend. Did I turn this on?
Question?
I did.
You didn't?
I did.